We denounce these illegal tariffs, and we think that they're a direct attack against our workers and now in the copper industry. And so we'll fight against them.
$2.5 billion gone. That's the financial hole Ford says the new tariffs will punch into its 2025 earnings. Just across town, analysts predict that Stellantis could see profits drop by as much as 75% if these new levies stick around. But the biggest twist? It's happening north of the border. Canada's Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, isn't mincing words. She's calling Washington's tariffs a direct attack on Canadian workers and has circled July 21st in bold red ink. Her message is simple. Remove the tariffs, or Ottawa will strike back. What's on the table? Energy cuts, export bans on metals, and a $29.8 billion countermeasure package. Once celebrated as partners in the world's smoothest supply chain, the United States and Canada now look more like opponents in a trade ring. One side is throwing tax punches from the Oval Office, while the other is quietly signing new deals from London to Jakarta. The clock is ticking. If Washington backs down, Detroit might catch a break. If not, Ottawa is ready to land the next blow, and workers on both sides of the border will feel it first. Here's the backstory. The White House has revived Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act, a Cold War law originally designed to protect missile parts. Now it's being used to slap tariffs on steel, aluminum, copper, and even Canadian-made vehicles. The reasoning? National security. The reality? Canada supplies Detroit with nearly half of the metals that keep its car factories running. And this isn't just a one-off event. In early July, Washington sent identical letters to 20 different countries, warning that if they don't sign new one-on-one trade deals, blanket tariffs of 25 to 50% will be imposed by Liberation Day. It's basically a global countdown clock, sign up or pay up. Investors reacted fast. In a single week, foreign investors dumped United States treasuries, causing yields to spike and pulling billions out of New York in search of safer investments. Allies noticed too. Because if Canada, one of America's closest partners, can suddenly be labeled a national security threat, who's next? Now, when Washington says national security, many allies hear negotiation tactic. And with July 21st approaching, the real question isn't whether Canada will blink, it's whether America's protective shield has just turned into a boomerang. On July 11th, the White House fired another shot, a 35% blanket tariff on all Canadian imports. That announcement hit Ottawa like a fire alarm. Within 48 hours, Canada's Industry Minister Melanie Joly gathered mining CEOs in Ottawa. First Glencore and Teck Resources, then Rio Tinto on July 8th, where she laid out a two-option plan. Option 1, Washington scraps the tariffs. Negotiations restart. Option 2, Canada hits back hard. A 25% steel tariff of its own, plus export bans on hydropower, primary aluminum, and softwood lumber. These targets aren't random. They're chosen for maximum pain. Ontario's hydroelectricity powers factories in Buffalo and Syracuse. Quebec's aluminum is in 1 out of every 3 pickups built in Michigan. British Columbia's lumber frames half of the new homes in the Pacific Northwest. Ontario is ready to flip the first switch. On July 12th, Premier Doug Ford confirmed that Ontario will add a 25% surcharge, about $7 per megawatt hour, on every unit of electricity heading to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota once the United States clock hits midnight on the 22nd. According to grid traders, that will cost United States buyers between $200,000 and $300,000 Canadian dollars per day, enough to wipe out the thin summer profits of dozens of factories across upstate New York. And ordinary people are already reacting. Border data released on July 10th shows that cross-border trips from Canada to the United States are down 76% compared to last year. Travel agencies are rerouting vacationers to Spain and Croatia instead of Florida, and airlines have cut over 320,000 seats on Canada-United States flights for August. Duty-free shops from Niagara Falls to Montana are reporting sales drops of nearly 50%. Joly's team calls this strategy solution mode, but the message is loud and clear. Canada waded through tariffs on aluminum, then steel, then copper. Now the countdown matters more than the talk. There are 10 days left. If Washington changes course, the tariffs disappear. If not, the retaliation starts, from Ontario's dams to Quebec's smelters, all the way to tourists trading in Disney passes for tickets to the Ural Mountains. In a summer where patience is measured in megawatts and airline miles, Ottawa is making its position clear. The next move belongs to the White House, and the electric meter is still running. Just 2 weeks ago, a piston cast in Quebec could cross the Ambassador Bridge, get milled in Detroit, head back to Windsor for heat treatment, return to Dearborn for final machining, and finally end up in an Ontario engine plant, all before being installed in an F-150 truck. Industry experts say some auto parts still cross the US-Canada border 6 times or more before a car is finished. The real shockwave hit on July 11, 2025. When the White House made it official, a 35% blanket tariff will hit all Canadian imports starting August 1st. The announcement came just hours after General Motors halted its Silao, Mexico pickup production and warned workers in Windsor that the camshaft row could be idle for at least 3 weeks. Why? Because there's still no clear way around these growing border taxes. But this slowdown isn't new. Stellantis already made the first move back in April, shutting down production at Brampton Assembly and laying off 900 U.S. workers as a reaction to the earlier 25% tariff. Now, with July's higher rate, what started as a slowdown is quickly becoming a full stop. Meanwhile, the cost of materials is skyrocketing. Copper prices have spiked to a record $5.68 per pound after Washington hinted at an additional 50% duty on this metal, essential for EV motors and wiring. Suppliers responded immediately by adding surcharges to every harness and radiator being shipped this month. Ottawa's response is targeting the same pressure points. On July 12th, Ontario reaffirmed it will slap on a 25% hydro export fee at 0001 on July 22nd if negotiations don't pause the tariff timer. This will raise power costs for over 170 plastics and stamping factories in upstate New York. At the same time, Sudbury's aluminum mines have orders to reroute billets to Rotterdam, leaving U.S. smelters starving for supply. For context, American buyers are already paying the Midwest premium, which has now tripled since 2021, hitting 60 cents per pound. For consumers, the math is brutal. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation warns that car prices could rise by as much as 25%, adding about $7,000 to the price of a midsize SUV once current inventories run out. Dealers in Ohio and Texas report that customers are rushing to buy cars now to avoid the August price surge. Meanwhile, banks are seeing a jump in 7-year auto loans as households try to lock in payments before rates go even higher. Even the border itself feels the hit. According to Canada Border Services, truck crossings over the Ambassador Bridge dropped 18% in the last 10 days. At the same time, Amtrak's Toronto-Chicago corridor cut 2 daily runs after southbound ticket sales collapsed. For decades, automakers have balanced on tight margins and relied on just-in-time production. But tariffs have turned that into a high-stakes relay over hot coals. Every trip across the border now piles up not just minutes, but dollars, thousands in taxes and metal premiums that snowball by the mile. And the clock is ticking toward July 21st. Every hour that passes means more parts stranded on the wrong side of a toll booth, and more car buyers staring at price tags that look like mortgages. But cars aren't the whole story. Just walk into any hardware aisle this week, and you'll feel the pinch too. On June 9th, the Midwest aluminum premium shot past 61 cents per pound, a 161% jump since January. Buyers rushed to lock in prices, but the ripple effect continues. By July 14th, hot-rolled coil in Chicago still hovered around $881 a ton, about 1/3 higher than last fall. These numbers sneak into everything that moves, rides, or cools: body panels, refrigerators, even barbecue lids. The sticker shock is no longer just a prediction. On July 12th, Coca-Cola bottlers told investors they're shifting summer promotions to plastic bottles because can costs have exploded beyond budget. A Reuters survey from June 24th shows smaller food brands are testing foil pouches and cartons just to dodge the metal costs. For builders, there's no easy escape. The National Association of Home Builders warned back in May, and again on July 8th, that tariffs on steel, copper, and lumber could add about $10,900 to the price of a new single-family home. In places like Ohio, mortgage brokers say that extra cost is enough to push 1 in 12 first-time buyers out of the market. Households are already feeling the pressure at the checkout. The latest S&P Global PMI, released July 11th, shows the sharpest jump in price inflation since last winter, with furniture and recreational goods leading the spike. The San Francisco Fed put a number on it. If the August tariffs hit at full force, the average household could lose 0.4% of real income, about $320 from the median paycheck before New Year's. And Ottawa isn't done. The 25% hydro export fee set for July 22nd will drive up factory power bills south of the Great Lakes, and the impact will trickle down into grocery shelves and auto parts bins within weeks. Tariffs may have been sold as a shield, but the bill shows up at the register and in real estate closings, far from any customs booth. Every cent added to aluminum rolls or a ton of steel winds up in the shopping cart. The question isn't whether shoppers will notice anymore. That part is obvious. Prices are changing, choices are shrinking, and wallets are feeling tighter. Now the real question is how long everyday consumers will keep swiping their cards, tapping their phones, and filling up their carts before the actual slowdown kicks in. In today's global market, trust has quietly become the most valuable and most scarce resource. Since President Trump launched his aggressive tariff blitz, Canada has been quietly pulling away from its heavy reliance on the U.S. market. Back in the day, a massive 78% of Canada's total exports went to the United States. Today, that number has slipped to 68%. At the same time, Canada's trade with Europe, Australia, and Japan has skyrocketed, up 42% in value. Ottawa is celebrating this shift, framing it as proof that the Canadian economy no longer has to depend solely on Washington's checkbook. But there's another side to the story. Behind the scenes, Canadian exporters are adjusting quietly but seriously. More and more contracts are being redrafted to avoid the US dollar altogether. Instead, invoices are being priced in euros or Chinese yuan, a move that, according to trade lawyers, is designed to protect businesses from future tariff shocks. This isn't just a Canadian trend, it's part of a global economic tremor that's slowly gaining momentum. On July 9th, the International Monetary Fund released new data showing that the US dollar's share of official global reserves has fallen to 57.8% by the end of 2024. That's the lowest level in 3 decades. Meanwhile, the euro's share has quietly risen to 20.1%, a small but meaningful shift. It might seem like just a minor crack in the system, but each time a new tariff threat is tweeted out, that crack widens a little more, and investors are already hedging their bets. After 4 straight months of rolling tariff threats, nearly $4 trillion has been wiped off the value of the U.S. stock market. Where's that money going? A lot of it is fleeing toward gold, European debt, and safer international assets. Even the Federal Reserve in San Francisco is warning about the fallout. They've projected that these new duties could reduce real household income in the U.S. by about 0.4% over the next year. To put that into perspective, that's like a nationwide pay cut happening long before any factory jobs actually come back home. The dollar isn't collapsing yet, but the erosion of its dominance has clearly started. Each time another tariff is announced, another truckload of Canadian aluminum is rerouted to Rotterdam, bypassing U.S. buyers. And each time, another banker switches from dollars to euros to price a shipment. In the past, confidence was the cheapest part of doing international business. Now, it's suddenly the hardest thing to find. Let's pause and think about this from a consumer's perspective. What if every grocery run started to feel like a tax hike? That's the reality Canadians are starting to face. In just 6 weeks, Washington's 35% tariff slammed the Canada-US supply chain, leaving auto plants frozen, unable to produce, and sending aluminum prices skyrocketing, up 162% compared to January levels. On July 14th, the Toronto Stock Exchange futures slipped by 0.1% as investors braced for even more tariff threats and stalled negotiations. According to the San Francisco Fed, if these duties stay in place, U.S. household incomes could shrink by about $320 on the median paycheck before the end of the year. So here's the big decision point. Will the White House back down before July 21st, easing tariffs and restoring a more friendly, brotherly trade rhythm with Canada? Or will Canada double down on its pivot, forging new trade alliances with Europe and China, and continuing to move away from the US dollar in favor of euros and yuan? The world is watching this closely. Let me know your thoughts below. Where do you stand? Should Canada keep pushing forward, or is it time for Washington to rethink its strategy?